business, aka strategy, prioritization, not on the tactics of what we need to do next or what we need to do today. And so your job becomes attracting talent and aligning incentives. And so the ultimate test for you is, can you take 3 months off and have the business grow anyways? Like, this is the easiest, especially for those of you who are brick and mortar. This is super important. If you're brick and mortar, a lot of you guys want to get my second location, want to get your third location. This is the simplest litmus test. If you can leave it alone, like your phone doesn't, like your phone doesn't ring, and I'll tell you how to do that in a second, right? I call it the phone test. I'll tell you later. But 3 months later, it's bigger, great. It's the same. We have to figure out a way to get it to be able to grow. Unless you're in a super cap market where there's no way it can grow, fine. But the vast majority of businesses can improve, can grow year over year over year if you have a good business. And if it's flat, the thing is that you still have some sort of magic over here. As soon as the eye of Sauron moves, sometimes if it's flat, it's going to go down. Now all of a sudden you've got double the liability, double the debt, double the overhead, half the talent because it's spread. And now you have more risk and less profit. No bueno. So this is why it's so important. You're like, man, that's never going to happen. It's like, right. That's why a lot of people shouldn't have second locations for much longer than they think. That's why overexpansion is one of the number one reasons people got a business. So zooming out, so you're like, okay, how do I find these types of A players, right? Is we want to look for people who describe their role in metrics in as much detail as humanly possible, right? So I can measure someone's skill in any endeavor based on the quality and the quantity of metrics they track. So if I said, and I'll tell you the first time, like a great example of this. So the first time I hired a really good HR professional, and I've had plenty of them in my history, but the first time I hired a good one, she asked me questions on the interview. She was like, so what's your cost of acquiring talent? And I was like, I don't know. That's a good question. I should know that. And she was like, what's your time to fill? And I was like, wow, I didn't really think about it. She was like, okay, what's your two-way fit in terms of what percentage of 90 days later do both the employee and the manager say that it's a 10 out of 10 fit? And I was like, don't know. And so she starts giving me all these different metrics for the talent side of the business that I had no idea about. I was kind of in the internet marketer world of, if I have a low refund rate, therefore my product is good. It's kind of like I had that on the talent side where I was like, which by the way, that is not how you know you have a good product. Just FYI. I was on the talent equivalent of that of like, well, we haven't had any lawsuits lately. It's like, duh, you think? That's probably not a good way to know if you have a good culture or a good team or a good talent management process. And so again, the quality and quantity of metrics. Now, this particular HR professional was a leader in turnarounds. And so she knew all these different metrics. And then obviously I learned all those things from her and then discarded her. I'm kidding. But I learned those skills so I could apply them. And fundamentally, I try to find people who can teach me things because that's like the best thing in the world. It's like you pay someone to say, hey, you know way more than me. Go do that in here. When you're starting out, though, it's hard to afford those people because those people don't want to work for you or you can't afford them or both, right? Now, I'll give you a couple rules of thumb that also took me too long to figure out. Is that number one, I would interview more people than you think you should. And I know how costly this is as a business owner, so you want to stack as many as you can. Also, I highly encourage group interviews. Pretty high up. Once you get into director and executive, it's tough. But like anything that's like frontline to maybe even manager, you can have group interviews because it'll save you time, and you'll very quickly be able to read people's vibes. And so the idea here is that I'll tell you a story. For school, Sam interviewed 600 developers. 600 developers to find our co-founder Daniel, the CTO. 600. So think about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so that's just me naming numbers, and that felt like it took a long time. Now imagine each of those represented a 30 to 60 minute conversation. And then imagine that that's over a year of those conversations. It is brutal. But when you do that, what happens is you start to get a lot of nuance of who's good and who's not. When you talk to 10 people who say that they are a manager, a sales manager, you're going to get a way better idea than when you talk to one of who's actually legit. When you talk to your 50th person, you already know who's got game. And so what happens is it starts to tune your picker. Because fundamentally, the reason I think we've been able to grow businesses faster and faster and faster with each next company that we start is because pattern recognition becomes one of your biggest assets. So like some people call this wisdom or whatever you want to call it. But fundamentally, it's just that I've had a good sales manager. They looked like this. you look like that person. Therefore, you have a higher likelihood of working out in this role. But to figure out which sales manager was good, I had to hire 5 different sales managers and waste 6 months or a year on each one of these before I finally found somebody who was good. So that's the thing, is that if you look at every role in the business, and again, this goes from the ground up. So a frontline support rep, a frontline sales rep, a frontline media editor, whatever. And then all of a sudden, it's like, okay, those start to work, and then your business starts to grow. And then you're like, I've never hired my first level of management. So you got to figure out what a good sales manager, a good media manager, a good, all these roles. And then after that, you're like, okay, well, that starts to grow. Now I've got my director level. And so each of these levels, you keep putting these people in until eventually you know what it looks like when it's right across an entire org. And so what happens is when you start really building businesses, you're not actually building the business. It feels much more like assembling the people who then build the business. Which leads us naturally into the third of our little buckets of what do you do to remove key man risk. And I'll give you one more little tip. When you're doing all those interviews, if you aren't learning from the